Hey there, Scott.
Hey, what's up, bro?
It's good to see you. It's been a long time.
You too, man. How you doing?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Just a little under the weather a bit. I think I have a cold or something like that. How about yourself?
I'm doing good.
Hey, congratulations on that groundbreaking interview with Jason Blaha.
Oh, thank you, bro.
No, it was
Oh,
really a great interview, and it is groundbreaking. Nobody has ever interviewed Jason Blaha before.
I know. He actually warned me beforehand. He said, I just got to warn you, like, just like for integrity reasons, he's like, the trolls are going to come after you and destroy you. And I got so many dislikes and people hate me now. But I let it all, water off a duck's back like Boston.
Did they really start hating you? Those people that hate Blaha?
Oh, I got so many dislikes, and every video after that, more dislikes than likes, and like comments of people who like, because people hate him. They hate him so much, and they they won't forgive him. So
Apparently, that happens to more people in the public eye than we realize. So recently, I discovered. I know you follow MMA as well, so I think you know about Brendan Schaub, right?
yeah,
Did you know that Brendan Schaub has a similar like level of hate toward him as Blah?
no, I had no
Yeah.
idea.
There's
I didn't know that.
this is shocking. This is shocking. So there's a Reddit subreddit called The Fighter and the Kid, and it's just about hating Brendan Schaub. It's like 50,000 people that are as hateful as the ones toward Blaha, but toward Brendan.
I had no idea. I did not know that.
Yeah, yeah. When I saw it, it made me feel a little relieved because I have these kind of people that hate me myself. And sometimes they say things about me. I'm like, why do you even think that? Like I say something and they think I'm lying. And then when I saw this happen to Brendan too, I was like, okay, maybe it happens to a lot of people. It just depends on, how your internet path goes exactly.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think there's just gonna be people that hate. I don't know. I think there's people that they don't care really. They're just there because that makes them feel good to hate on somebody.
Bro, if you look at the Brendan Schaub subreddit, you'll be so shocked because you'll see people there hating on Joe Rogan. And you're like, why would you? Joe Rogan is like such an exemplary character and he stands up for the truth. He takes personal risks for what he believes in. And everybody can see that. And you see, there'll be threads there just hating on Rogan. Like, oh, this guy sold out. He's doing it for the money. He's this and that. You're like, how could you be so antagonistic? So when I saw those threads, I was like, oh, okay. This is just some general hate at some point.
Bro, I gotta say, you look great, bro. Like you look way better than last time I saw you. Like you looking big and you look really young and everything. You look good.
It's the effect of getting rid of the ponytail mainly. The ponytail was
Oh,
I didn't realize, but my wife now agrees. So when I was gonna go cut the ponytail, I was like, I told my wife, I think I'm starting to look like a pedophile. I need to get rid of this ponytail. That's what I said, literally. My wife didn't say anything back. She didn't say anything. I cut it. A few months go by. She looks at an old video. She's like, I see what you mean. That was very bad. You shouldn't have had the ponytail. You look very creepy.
I mean, I laughed I loved the video because I was thinking it right when you made the video about your neck getting bigger. I was starting to think, I was like, man, his neck looks huge. Like, what is going on? Because like you used to be really thin, and then all of a sudden you just like your neck got huge and you just started looking jacked. And I was like, what the hell is this real? Like, is he really? And then you made a video about it right when I was like thinking it.
Because people kept commenting on the neck thing, and I wanted to explain why it happened, why it grew. It's just muscle memory, the glycogen goes to wherever it used to go before. So once I started eating higher protein and working out and stuff, the neck grew, which really concerned me, by the way, because I don't want the sleep apnea to come back.
Yeah.
So I'm really concerned. I'm like trying to atrophy it in some way. I talked to a plastic surgeon recently. I was asking him, is it possible to like Botox? Because I was wondering about these bodybuilders like Nick Walker. I was wondering, are these guys really Botoxing potentially their abs on the side, the obliques? So anyway, I was asking him about this. I was wondering about my neck. I was like, well, I gotta Botox it so it doesn't grow. But you can't do that apparently. Apparently, like you have to, if you use Botox, the whole muscle has to not work. So you'll have issues standing up straight or whatever.
There was a guy that I knew. His name was Joe Grosso. He trained like Cain Velasquez and stuff. Like he used to be like the strength coach for the guys at AKA in San Jose. And he had like 23-inch arms, but his neck wasn't that big. And I remember he told me, he's like, if you really strain your face when you're lifting, like if you strain your face, he's like, your neck it'll take over the lifts that you do. And he's like, you have to relax your face when you're lifting. Like if you're doing arms, this was his, I don't know if it's true, but he had a small neck and huge arms, man. I mean, freaking gigantic arms.
Well, in defense of that, what I notice sometimes is like I'll be doing a movement. Actually, this usually happens to me if I'm pulling something. Sometimes my neck, I'll get like I don't know what it is, but I'll jam up my neck basically during the movement, which doesn't involve my neck. Like I'm pulling something with one arm and suddenly my neck hurts afterwards. So my neck was definitely activated during the movement, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Exciting. Hello, John Lloyd.
They are.
Hey, Leo, how you doing?
Welcome, Bostin and John. It's great to have you guys on the show.
It's good to be here.
So, yeah, we were just catching up. Scott and I, we arrived a little bit before you guys. John, have you ever had a chance to see our show?
Well, yeah, no, I've watched you in Boston before.
Oh, excellent. So I wanted to tell you that it might seem a little creepy because we're going to ask you a lot of questions about yourself. But the reason why is just because the show is sort of an autobiographical part about Boston. So there are elements about Boston's life that we don't know about as much, especially his childhood and so on. So I thought it would be fun today to ask you some questions about that.
You bet.
Starting first, I'll ask you some general questions before we go to the subscriber questions because we had a lot of questions from subscribers. First of all, are you from California? Did you grow up here?
I grew up in Spokane, Washington.
Oh, interesting. How did you end up in California initially?
So I came to California. We had two wrestling trips. Wrestling was I was a three-sport guy all through school, but wrestling was my main sport. So in wrestling, I went to junior college. We were national champions in North Idaho, and since we were national champions, every year we got invited to California because California has so many junior college wrestling teams, colleges in general, that they have their own state tournament in junior college in California. And they always invited the national champion, which is the NJC2As, to their end of season tournament that was just before the state tournament in California. So 2 years I came once to in Northern California at Chabot College, and then the next year in Fresno. And I fell in love with the weather in California. So I got an opportunity. So when I went to the Fresno tournament my sophomore year in junior college, I ran into the guy that was Fred Rodriguez, which was going to be getting a head coaching job at Long Beach. And he recruited me. I was actually recruited at other colleges that were like, Oklahoma's and Iowa's and strong wrestling colleges. But I had this thing about coming to California. Once I saw California, it was like, I got to go to California. So that brought me to Long Beach.
And that was for university?
I went to Long Beach State in 1976 and wrestled for Long Beach State for 2 years back when they had a program. So that brought me to California. So I've been here since the 70s.
Well, a side note, have you ever encouraged Bostin to get into wrestling? I never heard of Bostin doing wrestling.
He wrestled for his junior year. He was killing it, but he had no interest to stay with wrestling.
I quit wrestling for bodybuilding. My first show.
He lied to me. I said, Bostin, so what's the Christmas schedule for your wrestling practice? He goes, oh, Dad, it's not mandatory. It's if you want to show up, you just show up. Wrestling is not like that. It's like, I should have, it's not like a big pile of BS, right? Like, it's like wrestling. It's like, there's it's man, you show up or you don't wrestle, right? So
that's hilarious.
Anyway, that's sure enough, Bostin, because Leo, all he wanted to do was train. Okay. That's when the bug had hit him. The bug hit him in his sophomore year in high school. He was on the rest. He was playing football and he at that time he was just in the gym. Of course, his mom and dad had the gym, and he was in the gym, and he was like, oh, Dad, this is so boring. You said you were going to be done in 10 minutes. You're still working out. How long is it going to, he was lazy. He was lazy in the gym. He didn't have the interest, right? It's like, something's got to click with this kid soon, man, because he's got the genetics to do good things in sports and So anyway, so the light switch went out in the fall in his sophomore year. Actually, it was your freshman year. It was when you were 15.
For what? For which part?
When the light switch went out, when you started getting
16.
So yeah, it was a sophomore year. Okay, so he just all of a sudden, it's like he started seeing these changes in his body, and it just was like overnight. It's like all of a sudden, that's all he could do to be completely consumed. The learning, he already knew about nutrition and stuff and eating well with his parents and doing that and running the gym and working with clients all the time. And he was already into that, early on. He probably shared with you how he got into that. We got him into the shows and stuff, and he was doing the guest posing as a young boy. And so he was exposed to all of that. But as soon as he got totally head over heels into the whole thing of bodybuilding, his lifestyle, he ended up, he didn't care about anything else. So that whole wrestling thing, it just, the coaches came to him, he goes to class, after Christmas break, he goes into wrestling practice, Boston, Coach George, what are you doing here? What are you doing? Where were you the whole Christmas break? Oh no, I've just been training and, been training and doing my thing in the gym and stuff like that, but I, keep it in shape. He goes, go, Boston, you want to wrestle. If you want to stay on this team, you're going to have to stay after. You're going to run bleachers. You're going to do this and
I
that.
said, screw that.
He goes, Coach, stop. I really don't want to wrestle anyway. I just want to bodybuild. But Boston went to the Westlake Invitational in like November of that year before this whole thing went down.
Yeah.
And he went all the way because he didn't really have any skill level, but he was so powerful even then at 17 that he would just manhandle the guys on the mat. And I remember I had a job that day in Calabasas. I was an inspector. I was on a job, and I was coming back and forth watching his matches. I barely made his finals. He made it to the finals. He pinned everybody. And he was wrestling a guy that was like way, the senior and experienced and stuff. And the guy had him in a combination pinning move to where it's impossible to get. When a guy is chest to chest perpendicular to your body, and he's on his feet, you don't throw the guy. You're gonna have to, that's just the way you're basically gonna get stuck. Yeah. And Boston, he arches up and he takes a guy with his hand on, and he just head over tea kettle, and he throws the guy for the back position he was in, and he pins the guy, and he wins the tournament. And he goes from that. He could have really. The coaches saw all the potential. Said, your son we haven't seen this kind of natural, mat strength and this natural, this potential that needs to build obviously through learning skills. But he's got a lot of potential. But I said, yeah, I know that, but he just, he doesn't really even like wrestling. And he just, that was it.
Not to mention that wrestling is probably, I think, the most tiring sport to do in high school. Like, it's the most exhausting.
It's extremely tough.
The practices would kill me, Leo. So I would ditch for the gym all the time.
Boston, I was similarly confused. I went to wrestling practice for 1 week, but unlike you, I didn't have a father that knew anything about wrestling. So when I went to it, I thought it was just a sport, and I thought you can't use this in real fights. It's not useful at all for combat sports. Turns out I'm completely wrong. All the UFC fighters do wrestling now. But so I didn't know that. So I did it for a week. I was like, why would anybody do this to themselves? This is so tiring. I was running up the stairs, up and down. I'm like, this is crazy. I smoke cigarettes. I can't do this. I was like a 15-year-old. But Mr. Lloyd, I wanted to ask you, was Boston always obsessive as a kid? Like, would he get into, because you said that once the bug got him, he was gone and he was into bodybuilding. Was he always like that as a kid?
As far as in the way
as far as like getting obsessed about one topic and pursuing that single-mindedly, or was that the first thing that got him like that?
Boston, no, Boston was all over the map as far as like as a kid growing up. He had problems with concentration in school. He was always getting himself into trouble. He was kind of like the class clown. He had difficulty with comprehension in the beginning. Boston's aptitude, he was very smart, but he was kind of all over the place as far as not really putting focus in any one thing. He was kind of like trying to find himself at a young age, and he ended up getting in a lot of trouble. Innocent stuff, but mostly just being a class clown. And not what it was when he found a weakness in mostly the female teachers, when he found that go along with the protocol of the class. If he was like being a standout strong, if he didn't agree with whatever the persuasion factor was of the teacher trying to get the class to do whatever, or being a little, but if he saw a little waffleness within that teacher, he would completely take advantage. But the male teachers and some strong female teachers that were really solid and they didn't take any BS, he did really well as long as there was that structure. But if he had a little bit of a gap, if he saw a little bit of wiggle room where his teacher had a little bit of weakness in any area, he found it, and he would just be the worst student in the class. He would get sent to the office all the time. His mom and I would constantly be called to the schools, and we'd have to deal with this, and he was like that but everything changed at that point when I'm telling you, when the structure hit him with bodybuilding. Then he was a pleasure in class. He wouldn't take any guff. Then his grades completely improved. He'd get in trouble because he'd bring his power drinks to class. He'd be drinking. He says, you can't have these mixed, protein drinks and drinking these protein drinks in class and stuff like that, or having your food, little Tupperwares and stuff like that. You can't do that. You got to wait for your, for the breaks and for the lunch.
I got actually kicked out of a class for good because I kept drinking protein in the class without the.
Why were they upset about that so much?
The teacher was just an ass. It was like my first week and he wouldn't let me have my protein, and I just ignored him and kept drinking it.
So Mr. Lloyd, when you moved to Long Beach, how did you get into bodybuilding yourself? How did the transition from wrestling and collegiate wrestling?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Leo, I was like, in that day, I was kind of like the oddball guy because I just loved weights. I lifted weights. I loved weights from the time I was 13. When I was in eighth grade track, I was a shot putter, discus thrower, and sprinter. And I got into weight training. I had a really good coach, Coach Bell, in 8th grade. And he had a structured weight training program that we got into. And so I got hooked on training because I love the pump and all that early on through my sports. So when I went to Long Beach and at the end of my wrestling career, I was already started. My very first gym membership was at Garden Grove Athletic Club, and before that, of course, it was just in the athletic complexes, weight rooms and stuff that we used. And then so when my wrestling career was over with, which I had it's a long story I'm not going to go into, but my career ended unfortunately with a broken foot, and I missed out on my red shirt year, my senior year, so I lost really that whole last year. I probably would have done really well in the NC2A's Division I there that year because I was a winner of all the tournaments and stuff like that going into it the year before, and I would probably done really well, but I didn't get that opportunity. So the natural thing for me was because I love powerlifting. I was more of a powerlifting bodybuilder. Oh. So initially, I went into the gym. Then I got another membership because the real story of the conversion of really from powerlifting to bodybuilding was the second gym I joined was California Gym in Westminster, and Rod Kuntz, Mr. USA 1977, was running that gym. So Rod was putting on in gym powerlifting events and stuff like that. So I was doing that. I had the first time I ever deadlifted, I pulled 675, with no straps, no belt.
Holy, what? You were bizarrely strong.
So I was a strong guy. So, wow. So I went, so I did my very first show was the Ironman, the 79 Ironman. In those days, the Ironman was 50 points for bodybuilding, 50 points for powerlifting. First half of the day was powerlifting. Then you posed at night. So I went in at 237 in 1979, and I hit a master's total in powerlifting, and then I won the bodybuilding. And Paul Love, who was the sponsor of that event in San Jose, and he was put that show on every year. When he gave me the trophy that night, he says, "John," he goes, "do yourself a favor. There's no glory in powerlifting. Get into bodybuilding. You have a big future in bodybuilding." That between him and Rod Kuntz, that's the conversion into bodybuilding.
So then you began competing. Did you compete? So you were in a generation which I think in the modern day you would have been a pro. So it's a little bit interesting. Like you competed mostly in the amateur levels. You never succeeded in getting a pro card, right?
Right.
So how long did you compete for?
I lost to Gary Strider. My last show was the 84 USA.
Ah, that's what that comment was. Oh, we got some subscribers saying something about Gary Stridham. I was wondering what it was.
Gary Stridham, he got 4 firsts. I got 3 firsts in the 84 USA.
So he lost by 1 point.
And then he lost to Phil Williams for the overall.
Unbelievable. It was so competitive back then. How many years did you compete for? And when did the gym come into your life?
Oh, I competed from that Ironman in December of 79 through the June of 84 or the July of 84 USA. And then that was it. And then, just got into the gym business. But when it cut my bodybuilding career short was I had a really bad herniation of my L5S1, the lower back, the lumbar. And it changed my training completely for 3 years. And then at the same time, I was getting into the Gold's Gym ownership thing of doing different gyms and stuff. And really the big picture is like really kind of an odd comparison to my son's track record of what he's done. But since my whole beginning of everything and getting into bodybuilding was through sports, and through sports, of course, I didn't even know what steroids were, But the big picture for me was I didn't like the fact that I had no choice. I had to take anabolics. Everybody at that level. Otherwise, there would have been no level like that.
Yeah.
And the very first, so I trained all these years, which I'm a solid believer in, reaching your full potential, where you're actually at a sticking point, a real sticking point, where you've put everything together, weight training wise, structure wise, nutrition wise, everything you're doing, and you're come to a point, if you're going to compete, to where you're maxed out naturally. And if you want to go beyond, then that's where I believe that steroids are absolutely must. And anabolics. But in my day, it was kind of baby stuff, baby dosages, baby stuff. But when I got injured really bad like that, because again, it was from my powerlifting. I was an idiot. Even at the 82, training for the 82 Mr. California, here I was doing power cleans with 365 like 3 weeks before the show. I used to do sets of 8 with power cleans from part of my back workout. That was I was a nut, because I remember I was track and field guy. I did all this Olympic lifting stuff, and I did power bodybuilding. And so so that screwed my back. So then, looking back, when I was injured like that, I thought, you know what? Man, this is like a blessing in disguise. It's like you're only as good as your last show. I had to keep pushing the envelope with the drugs. When I did the 84 USA, there was a guy in Northern California that was really up. They called them DDR drugs. It was the Bolasterone, the quinolone, which I didn't even really know the compounds. I know the compounds now in Bolasterone. I didn't know it really then. But I was doing more drugs for me, and looking back, comparatively to I think what guys are doing now, it's like, ridiculously still really low dosages. But I was making some incredible gains from 82 Cal to the 84 USA. And obviously it's a training, but you can make no mistake, it's also the drugs. So, but here's the thing. When I got injured, I looked at the big picture, and I wasn't happy with the drug thing.
You felt like you were burning the candle on both ends to some degree?
I didn't want to continue with the drugs. And it was, even though it hurt to get out at that time, because I probably could have gone much further. I don't know how much further. But anyway, I wasn't ready to stop, but that mixed with it, with getting in the business of the Gold's gyms, and then the whole thing about knowing it's just going to be more to get back into it. If I have to alter my training a little bit, because I can't train that heavy anymore because my back, I have to be careful. But the drug thing was really a big influence on that, and a factor of me coming to a point where I was okay with it. I'm going to live with this. I'm not going to get, I'm just going to change roads, which psychologically is not easy to go from being, I was a guy that was like 280 at 7% body fat. I was, I competed in the high 240s at the USA, but my training weight was like around 270, 275, lean, going from that, and then, having to make an adjustment where, I'm not saying I trained clean, the years after that, at least for a few years. I still took a little bit of stuff, but my size came away. It's a psychological, not so much, it's not physical. It's physiological in the fact you begin to identify yourself with this big person. But it was easier for me, I guess, than a lot of people maybe, because of the fact that I had the upbringing I had. there was, I was a sports guy that wasn't even into the steroid. It wasn't a lot of guys nowadays that, they may or may not have a little sports background, just agree. But some of these guys just get in from the beginning, and that's all they're doing is bodybuilding and stuff like that. And so they're introduced to the anabolics early. So I had a little bit different perspective on it, but it was a breath of fresh air, really, that I could escape that and save my health and save potential problems down the road, because I knew you're only as good as your last show, and to get better and better, it only means at least taking as much or more than I did before.
Mr. Lloyd, did the owning the gym affect you? Because that's what I was going to ask you. When you gave up maintaining that size, the identity is usually the major issue with people. I was wondering if having a gym and staying connected in that sense made it easier for you to give up part of that identity physically.
Yes, well, absolutely. Because my passion has always been in training, and not just myself, but helping other people achieve their goals. And so, all this time this is going on, of course, we're doing nutrition consultations. We had a program called Nutritionalysis through Gold's Gym that was really an awesome program that based a person's diet on their oxidative rate, their metabolism. That was a questionnaire. It was actually Neil Spruce and Billy Smith really formulated this with a doctor in Gold's Gym. I think his name was John Langdon.
Yeah, we've heard of it. Yeah, recently.
Yeah. Anyway, it was a very sound program that if people, when they answered this questionnaire, they kind of got set on a graph for slow, mid, fast, or fast oxidative rate, which is the rate at which you're breaking food down for your energy levels. That someone we put out diets and we had follow-ups every week and work with people. So that was an excellent thing. But my training never stopped either. And so I was still still working out and obviously, and maintaining somewhat size, but it's the quality of the physique that you have to just settle with, that you don't have again.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Bostin can find a similar way to feel completely engaged with the bodybuilding community, but not have to rely on his own physique also.
I'm getting there slowly but surely.
He will. It's going to take time.
Exactly. Well, this was okay. So I have to ask you some subscriber questions because we have a lot of them. They're actually really good questions. They a little bit all over the place. There's some about drugs. I'll get started with some general questions. So Tatsianyak says, who did John Lloyd look up to in terms of bodybuilding? Was he mentored by anybody in reference to training methods and drug protocols?
Really only Rod Kuntz. Only Rod Kuntz. I didn't really have anybody as far as looking up to their physique. I mean, everybody knows Arnold, and Arnold was, Arnold.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any like mentors like that.
Were there guys? So back then in the 70s, late 70s, were there any type of guru? Like Chris Aceto was in Gold's Gym in the 90s, but was there anybody in the late 70s or early 80s that was a guy that people went to learn things from? Oh, there was like that guy on the East Coast that Chris Aceto learned from, right, Bostin?
Yeah.
What's his name?
What was his name? Well, no, not Dan Duchesne. The other guy you sent me, he was out of shape.
Yeah. But anyway, I was just asking
Bob Grushkin.
Bob Grushkin. Were there people like that, Mr. Lloyd, on the West Coast that were helping people?
The Mecca, with Gold's Gym Venice is where, the guys that were like gurus like that were training and were working with people. And then of course the pros, and a lot of the pros were there and all that. Mm. But as far as the gurus that, were like being flocked to for their training knowledge and drug protocols or whatever, helping them, I never, with all my years of being, embedded in the sport, and being, connected with Gold's Gym, I was never associated, other than they were the corporate entity for Gold. I never associated with the Venice crowd.
Oh, really?
I was never part of Venice as far as knowing like the people. Of course, I know the people who were running the gym.
Yeah.
But the only person that sticks out that was always a go-to and was looked up to as like maybe the best, most consistent, long-term, early on, old school that went in, through his entire career was Charles Glass.
Oh, really?
That kind of identifies that, as far as trainers and what they were able to charge per hour and the reputation they had and how much people valued their training philosophy and work with different people and athletes through the years. He was a staple guy. But no, I didn't really have that other than Rod, the first mentor that I had that kind of steered me in the direction of like really proper. I already knew form for training, but he was also a very strong guy. So his style matched mine a lot because I like I said, I like to train heavy and all that. But as far as working with somebody that I would call a guru, no, not really. No.
Was his name?
Oh, wait, how about that one guy that dieted you down to nothing?
So there was a story Boston's referring to Lance Dreyer.
Oh.
Dreyer was 81, Mr. I think it was, I don't think it turned to the MPC. I think it was still Mr. America when Lance won I think it was the 81 Mr. America. But after that, between 81 and 82, he spent because Ed Connors, who was Ed Connors is the man as far as he was the person that I met at Rod's gym in Westminster that introduced himself to me and asked me if I was interested in ever wanting to get involved with Gold's Gym and running and managing Gold's Gyms with him when he got his first license, a franchisee, which is in San Francisco, which I eventually took him up on that offer because I was really close to getting my teaching credential. I'm a graduate in phys ed at Long Beach State. I was going to coach and teach. I was going to teach and coach wrestling. He would bring out Mike Mentzer for the 90 or for the 81 NorCal bodybuilding guest posing. Guest posing was a big thing back then. They used to pay big money. The pros come out and they do a seminar in the gym the next day after they pose. It was a big thing. Anyway, guest
posing is dead now, isn't it? That's really weird.
They don't pay as much.
Leo used to be huge. Mike Mentzer got it. He got a bundle, that weekend. But anyway, but one of the people that came out and we hosted was Lance Dreyer. And that was in 81, before the 81 Cal, he came out. I believe the 81 Cal was in May that year. So he must have come out somewhere like maybe in the winter or early spring of 81. And Lance had a really slow metabolism. So he really advocated 13, it was like really, I can remember this distinctly, Boston remembers, it was 1,300 to 1,400 calories a day, okay? And massive cardio, okay? So here I was, a guy with this fast metabolism, and I was like a crazy appetite guy. And I was like, at the time I was, I guess, 245, 250 pounds training for the Cal that year. And my weight really should have been about 230 on stage. And anyway, I followed Lance's protocol and it was what he was recommending for that Cal. And I was starving to death and I was getting skinnier and I looked like a stinking basketball player by the time the show hit. I took fifth. It was in San Diego. I took fifth in the heavyweight class that year. And then, it was a different story because so I quickly learned that, just because a guy is Mr. America, right, it worked for him. But I didn't know my body well enough to be smart enough to say, well, after 2 weeks of doing this, obviously this is not my game, right? I went ahead and did all of it. So yeah, he was one guy. Boston remembers that story.
I was about to say it's glorious how far we've come since the 70s. This doesn't happen anymore, but it seems to have just happened to James Hollingshead, who the same thing happened. So it's still happening. People are still following other guys' advice and losing muscle.
A lot of Patrick's guys that go catabolic. It's not just him.
So actually on this topic, Carved Out of Stone says, what does Jon think about the pros of previous generations currently heavily criticizing bodybuilders of today? Are these criticisms warranted, or is it mostly a case of overly nostalgic, grumpy old men? I don't know, Mr. Lloyd, if you've heard of the criticisms that they're talking about.
He's not much on social media, but he's talking about like the bodybuilders like Robbie Robinson, Arnold, talking down to the bodybuilders these days.
They're complaining about their calves, about their waists, about the conditioning. Mostly.
Well, I agree with the commentary on the athletes these days that may have abused certain substances where they get the distension.
Yeah.
And it ruins the aesthetic look of the physique, where otherwise they would have probably had much more pleasing physique because the abdominals, their breathing and their gut, their abdominals are just completely distended and they really obscures their overall look. You end up focusing on just that, right? Yeah. They could have a tremendous physique, but if that's an eye distraction, it's like doesn't fit. Like, why is that? It completely. I don't like that look at all, and it's never gonna, never pleasing. And how could it's only going to win if there's nobody else, in my book. So that part I understand. As far as the what other criticisms there are from the older pros, I'm not sure what those are, but I guess it would have to be judged on an individual basis.
What do you think of a classic physique? Have you ever gotten a chance to see those competitions?
Just some pictures. I don't really go to shows at all. Just pictures. I mean, it's based on some of these guys look fantastic, right? These guys are aesthetically, and the proportions and symmetry are really good, but it's not what I know as bodybuilding, as far as lightly muscled with good shape, and it's if that's what the judging criteria is, that's what it is. But it's a completely different look, and I think my personal opinion is all these different categories of competitions that have arisen in these last few years. I can't even keep track of all the different divisions, the different classes. It's a money grab. I mean, I look at it. I mean, it's great for some guys that may have no desire to get into the bodybuilding thing and the drug thing, to be able to attain the kind of physique and the work level that's required to get to that level of thickness, muscularity, everything combined. I mean, how many? Seriously, it's like we all know. At least the guys sitting, us, we know what goes into that. So there's a place for that. But as far as these shows, I mean, I don't know how are they still running into midnight, 1 o'clock?
Some of them, yeah.
I mean, let's face it. Why do we have to have all these? Why is there still all these divisions in these classes? Is it? I mean, and the thing is, the way I say a money grab, because these people, you don't like cross over with one fee. They're paying separate registration fees for every single division. And it has gotten so, I guess the point is, main point, it's gotten so commercialized.
Well, it's also confusing, Mr. Lloyd. Like, genuinely, I don't know what the bikini division is for the women. And I also don't know what the male physique version is with the board shorts. Boston and I genuinely don't know how they're judged. So if we don't know, nobody knows how they're judged. So
yeah, I mean, how do
we don't know what we're watching?
Convince fitness. Yeah, is there another one too?
Well, yeah, but then you go into the NPC and you got novice bikini now, true novice bodybuilding, and
I mean, come on, really?
It's a bit confusing.
Women's bodybuilding, and the bigger show, they actually had mixed pairs, and then bigger shows they had the fitness, the women's fitness or whatever it was. And it was just clean. It was like, but anyway, it's a different world.
Okay. So I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name, but Slizowski asks, he said, ask Boston's father what the gay for pay scene was like back then in bodybuilding. And if he has any stories, hopefully involving other bodybuilders and not himself. I like how he put that in brackets.
Anyway, like were people doing gay shit for money back then?
In bodybuilding.
But it's all, you're talking about online, they do that now.
Yeah, but they say, like, were people posing for people back then, like gay still was?
Okay, so the only thing I heard of back then that's similar to what you're talking about is live stuff that guys were doing with well-to-do people or whoever in the Venice scene.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, that's what I've heard of.
The only thing I've ever heard is in the Venice scene, where there was pros and amateurs that could go and do whatever the act that was called for. asked, and it was a gay thing for pay, But it wasn't online. I think it was in person, right?
Yeah, that's what we've heard. But I like how you said the act that was called for. It's a very mysterious. We don't know what they're doing.
The reason why I said, because honestly, what I heard was that some guys would only pose.
Yeah.
They would only pose for the gay guy, and they wouldn't do anything else. And they would get a fee for that. But there was there was no other hanky panky.
These words are great. Thank you. Okay, so also, a lot of people asked this. They wanted to know, what did the diets look like in the late 70s, early 80s, off-season diets and pre-contest diets on average? So was that a time where people were very anti-carbohydrate or anti-fat? What did it look like generally?
You know what it was? Leo. It was from in my day and my recollection of what most people would follow. There was really only three categories, including sodium. There was the overall calories. You had to count calories.
Yeah.
And the thing is, to this day, I'm thinking, well, you're counting calories, but how do you know your burn level, right? Like, you just learn your body. But you're basically counting calories, and they're counting fat grams. There's a percentage of calories.
Interesting.
Fat intake was a big thing. You didn't really hear about until later the zone diet and the keto diets. There wasn't so much of that at all, but it was the overall calorie count. It was the fat percentage of diet, and it was a sodium. It was a sodium intake.
And before shows, they would cut the fat really low and keep the protein high, right?
Back then, you never added fat to your diet. It was always just protein. It was always protein and carb. They didn't add fat. Maybe whole eggs. Did you ever do whole eggs?
Well, yeah, we did whole eggs. You would do whole eggs and mix with egg whites. That would be a normal breakfast.
But they didn't use like macadamia nut oil or avocado.
So it was just regular food, Leo. But it was clean. It was 5 to 6 meals. And especially getting close to whether it was off season, it was a lot of food in off season. But clean foods. And then it was always like, okay, so you're going to get a designated cheat day, a full day of cheating, in season and off season typically.
Really?
And, but there was a monitoring of calorie intake and really trimming the fats in a contest prep. And of course the sodium levels, you're keep an eye on that, especially close to show. But as far as scientific and the ketos and all that. No, at least in my circles, there wasn't much of that.
Mr. Lloyd, how did you guys dehydrate for the competition? Were you guys using a lot of diuretics back then, or was it like a sodium or water restriction? Or,
I can't speak for many. Diazide was popular. Diazide, potassium sparing diazide was popular back then. But the main thing was that was kind of like the go-to. Was just the maybe 10 days to a week before the show, cutting the sodium really, really low in your overall diet. And from Thursday to your Saturday morning show, maybe 4 ounces of water per meal serving. Wow. And do it mostly with water restriction. But there was a lot of fear about the diuretics because of the the water out of the muscle, and a lot of guys were afraid of that, and so there was more comfort level with monitoring the water with the meals, but as far as other tactics,
how did it compare in terms of difficulty compared to wrestling, dehydrating for wrestling for weight classes? Because I've always wondered that, because wrestlers are the guys that are most known for dehydrating, actually. But I assume that they're like going in saunas and they're not drinking water and stuff.
Yeah, no, wrestling was more drastic.
Yeah.
Because especially the last 2 years of college, I was coming down from a solid weight training weight of 235. And my last two off seasons, I'd get up to like 235 because I was really into the heavier weights and stuff. And back in my day, there wasn't, the ideal class for me would have been 215, because my weight of just eating super clean and wrestling, because every wrestling practice I'd lose like 8 pounds. Because wrestling is insane, right?
Yeah, it is.
So, you go in there and, with plastics on and, you wrestle in the 85-degree rooms and you're going to lose 8 pounds,
Crazy.
And anyway, so what I would do is I would get down. So in my day, there was 190 and there was heavyweight.
Oh, wow. It's 190 you had to get down to.
It was 190. So like I said, 215 would have been ideal, but it was crazy. So I had to really starve. And really that was that was where I really started, because my major course was, well, they call it kinesiology now. It was physical exercise or physical phys ed back then.
Yeah.
And what I would do, I would be on a really restrictive diet, but I would monitor my calories, and I was working with other wrestlers that were having a hard time maintaining strength the day of the wrestling match because of the weight class that we were called to get. Because much of it is who else is on the team. A lot of these guys had to diet down to get into an unrealistic low weight class because of the fact that there was a really tough guy at 134 that they couldn't challenge and beat. So they had to go down to 126.
Oh, interesting.
A lot of it was the stack, was the depth that you had on your team, right? In my case, I didn't have a choice, because with me, I had to go down to 190 because I didn't go down to 190. I was wrestling heavyweight. And you have a lot of quality wrestlers in college that are football players playing at 260, 270 that are coming down to 230. And if you're giving up 30, 20 pounds on the wrestling mat with a guy that's fairly equally with skills and with strength, you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Right? So I had to really be, it was a deck of cards. So a deck of cards is 440 when you count face cards as 10. So I would take the deck of cards in saunas. This would be like from Thursday on to, say, a Saturday tournament. And I would go in that on Thursday, and I'd be like 208. I have to make 190 or maybe 205. And I would literally do the sauna thing with plastics on my deck of cards, spitting, starving, everything. Okay. And then, because I had no choice those last 2 years. But I had a difficult time. I never didn't make weight. I always made weight. And I would get accused from the coaches on tournaments because I was so sucked down after because in tournaments you weigh on Saturday morning, or you actually weigh on Friday night. So you'd have a match on Friday and then rest the whole day Saturday. So I would end up, if I went into finals on a Saturday for a 2-day tournament, I would be like around 208, and I made 190 the day before. Wow. And because scratch weight, you had to go make 190 at the end of the season. It was like 192, then 191 to the season, and then 190 at the end of the season. And so I would go on the mat where I would be accused, like, how did this guy make? I want to see the records. This guy made weight. Yeah. How this guy? Because I was a big 90 pounder, but literally like coming off the scale from the weigh-in, I would down like 3 Gatorades. I was so dehydrated that it was just like I was just like a puff monster. Yeah. So it was not healthy for me at that weight.
It seems that the weight reductions in UFC at least have caused some potentially injuries to people, kidney injuries and stuff like that. I think in wrestling as well. Boston, did you ever know that the wrestlers had to dehydrate more than bodybuilders?
Oh no, I knew that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I just found this out because I've been watching Scott's buddy Chael. Yeah. I watch Chael and I hear wrestling stories, so that's how I've been learning about wrestling. But
Chael cut from 236 to 185 in like, I forget what it was, but it was like a ridiculously, it was like 30 days or 45 days or something. Yeah. 236 to 185.
You did that, Scotty?
No, Chael Sonnen.
Chael Sonnen is a UFC fighter.
Oh, okay.
Actually, he's from around Washington. He's from Oregon, isn't he?
West Linn, Portland area.
Okay, so I got to ask you a couple more questions before we go, because there are some interesting ones. So, okay, so a lot of people wanted to ask you about the drug you mentioned, which is called, I don't know where it's going right now.
Is it Bolasterone?
Bolasterone, yeah. So Pipe says, for John, I've heard Boston mention multiple times that your favorite injectable during your competitive years was Bolasterone, which, by the way, I tried to Google and I realized I don't know anything about this compound. Then he said, can you elaborate on what compounds the drug was composed of? It was one compound. How strong it was? What was your personal dosing frequency and amount per milligrams? And how did it compare to other drugs? So just to put this in perspective for you, Mr. Lloyd, the reason why we're asking this is I don't think this drug is around anymore. Wow. So most of us have never tried it. We've mostly heard about it from Boston.
Right. So so my understanding of Bolasterone back then, they called it a DDR drug, but it was out of East Germany.
Interesting.
But to me, it's like, really, after I found out the compounds, why couldn't it be formulated anywhere, right? Why East Germany? No. So it was Anavar, it was Prop 50,
Oh, it's more. Okay, I thought it was 1 compound.
It was. Didn't
you say there's Parabolin in it?
No. Yeah, Parabolin was a French.
It was a blend.
Glass. It was a the Parabolin came in that.
Okay, so Parabolin wasn't in it.
Glass ampule. No, it wasn't Parabolin. Okay, it was okay. It was Anavar. It was the fast acting test, which is the test probe, right?
Yeah.
Test probe. It was DECA.
Interesting.
And there was what was the last one? It was I believe there was a fat Stanislaw or Winstrol.
It's the white Winstrol.
Yeah, Stanislaw. And there was a fifth. They said there was a fifth compound in that.
So it was everything but the kitchen sink in one bottle.
Yeah, it was the one. And what the protocol was 1 cc a day. Okay, from 5 weeks before the show, to 2 weeks out.
Interesting.
They recommend you start at 8 weeks, but you did the 1 cc. I think it was 8 weeks. You do every third day to the fifth week out. Mm. Then from the 5th to the 2nd week out, you do like you once said every day, every other day, or every day. Mm. But so it was like a CC call out because but I was always scared of taking everything that they said to take the max. So I didn't take the max. I think I took like 1 cc every other day. and then they had you switch to the quinolone.
You guys have very different intuitions naturally, father and son. Son says, they told me to do this. Maybe I should do double just in case. Father says, maybe I should do half just in case. Risk aversion, polar risk aversion. Yeah, preferences.
Yeah. And then there was the quinolone. The quinolone was a weird one. I had no idea the compound in that, but it was complete muscle spare. It was like a primobolan acetate with a high anabolic factor and a fat burning factor, where you literally had to heat it up in the crystals. So you had to heat it up. Hmm. And I remember walking in the gym and literally there was a cutting factor with this stuff. I mean, it really did. It had an effect on like on not so much water loss, but a hardening. Mm. Hardening of them, like almost like that halotestin.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
It was like a blue 25 halotest, or was it 10 milligrams that guys would take?
Yeah, 10 mgs.
Anyway, it had effect where it actually it disallowed the body from burning protein. It was totally anti-catabolic. At the same time, fat burning, but you would literally be like. It would be like going on a diet and not taking any carbs in for 2 weeks. You had no energy. It was like no. It wasn't even. It was miserable. It was not worth taking. So I only did it for a few days, and I go, I can't do this stuff anymore. So I think I switched to acetate like the last 10 days before that show for the USA. But I honestly don't know what was in quinolone.
You know what we just discovered, Mr. Lloyd? We discovered that JFK was actually taking 20 milligrams of halotestin for years during his presidency, daily. Yeah, his hormone replacement for his Addison's disease, they actually used halotestin for a long period of time. So he was taking 20 milligrams, which if you guys have ever tried halotestin, 20 milligrams is a severe dose. It's so imagine his irritability and his psychology.
Whoa.
Really interesting. But he also had to take barbiturates and a bunch of other stuff. So we can't.
Gosh.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll ask you a couple more questions. I'm aware of it being late there and you guys probably being a bit exhausted. But okay, one question about the judging of shows. So I think maybe you're not following the shows very closely, but I was wondering, what do you think should be prioritized in shows? Muscular size, shape, or conditioning? The reason why I asked, recently we had a bodybuilder named Sean Clarida who was 175 pounds, beat he's 175 pounds, 5'2". He's a really small guy from the 212 class, beat two 6-foot guys. So the question here was from a guy named Piper. He said, I wanted to know Bostin and Jon's opinions on the judging of different shows all under the same IFBB umbrella. And if the next O is judged like the Legion show, which is the show I was just talking about in San Diego, surely Flex Lewis turns up looking like he did in the 212. He would smoke the whole field going by last week's criteria. Basically, what people are asking is the judging criteria of proportion and condition overwhelming size correct? Do you think that the bigger guy should always win, or should there be a smaller guy that can come in better condition and beat a bigger guy?
Well, my personal preference, my personal opinion is this is a bodybuilding category, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Basically, right?
Yeah, it's bodybuilding.
No, there's not one or the other. It's everything.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly.
I mean, there's got to be size, symmetry, proportion, and conditioning. But here's the thing: if you take a guy, to me personally, if you take a guy that has got the size, the muscle bellies, the proportion, and the symmetry, and he's way off the mark, muscularity wise, conditioning wise, and you have a guy that's highly conditioned that might not have the genetics, the full size, muscle bellies, proportion, symmetry of the guy that's really in shape, and it's a drastic, and he's off the mark enough to make a difference where this guy he's not ready for the show.
Exactly.
As long as the guy that is coming in peeled and conditioned isn't like just skinny and it's something is completely non-complete and unpleasing about his physique, I'm going to be more apt to judge for the conditioning.
Interesting.
Unless there's, I mean, it really is so subjective, as we all know. That's what the sport is.
Exactly. But
It didn't seem like many people complained that Sean won, though. It seemed like a lot of people had Sean winning.
yeah, it's interesting, right? I would have thought the opposite, but in this case, the condition, Mr. Lloyd, was so much better in the 175-pound guy. But the interesting thing about this question is also it's about consistency of judging. That's really what they're asking. They're saying, like, it's interesting that because if you looked at the Olympia, the Hadi was not put beyond Rami. That's where their complaint was. They said,
that is a complaint. I get that, because if they judge those shows the same, then that means Hadi should have won.
Yeah, basically, Mr. Lloyd, what they're noticing is that there's inconsistency in the judging between shows. So at the Olympia, the biggest guy won, and he was clearly less conditioned than the guy who placed third. But then in this show, they did the reverse. So I'm wondering, in the 70s and 80s, was judge?
Judges, right? It's not the same panel.
Yeah, no, it's a different panel. That's true.
There you go.
But in the 70s and 80s, was judging more or less maybe understandable? Were there more complaints, do you think, and more like shady stuff going on?
Way more consistency.
Oh, really?
I don't go to shows now, but from what I see with Boston's posts, and he has lineup shots and commentaries on things as the judging, and how lopsided, and seeing personally like what's happened to Boston and judging shows like that one I think was in Connecticut, son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one that I did?
The political. Yeah.
No, South Carolina.
South Carolina. I mean, I think that some of the judging is absolutely horrible. And when you have horrible judging, all bets are off. I mean, you're going to have lopsided judging. You have judging that doesn't make sense to anybody else that has a common sense eye. Then what are you looking at? Where are we? What is the criteria? Why how could it have gone that way? And then, so everything comes into play. Political, they've seen this guy in a show before several times. It was his year, his turn or her turn, or, it's just, that's the sport though. Unfortunately, it's a subjective sport, and
It's always been that way, huh?
You're going to have inconsistencies with your judging.
Interesting. I want to ask you two last questions about Boston before I let you go, because I know it's way later in Florida than it is here in California. So just a couple of questions. So one from John Stamos. He says, what are John's thoughts on all the crazy experiments Boston has done? And has he ever tried to interfere with any of them? I'm curious to know because Mr. Lloyd, I'm a new friend of your son's, but I always try to like privately, not on the show. I try to convince him of things, like not to do certain things or to be, more health conscious. And people don't realize. People who watch the show, they think that I don't do this because I don't do it on the show. So sometimes they don't think I care about him. They don't realize how hard it is to convince Bostin of anything. And if you're trying to convince him of something, you don't want to push him away from you. So like if you're too critical, you might make him feel uncomfortable. So you don't want to do that. So.
So Boston's my son.
Yes.
So number one is Boston's health. Yeah. So from day one through today, through every day, and Boston's, I'm a very spiritual man. I have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and he's my Lord and my Savior. And I pray for Boston every day that Boston's going to accept the Lord, which in doing that,
it's not a bad idea.
There's a moral rudder that goes along with that, right? And that's huge. But to answer your question, I mean, from day one, I have talked to Bostin till I'm blue in the face about the choices that he is making. I understand, Boston's reputation, his success is based on his honesty, his rawness. People appreciate. He doesn't BS. He's going to tell people. Doesn't care. He's not. If you lose, he's not here for popularity competition. He's here to reveal. He's very well studied, well read, and very knowledgeable on what he does, and the whole sport and nutrition wise, drug wise, protocols, content, everything about training and all that. But when it comes to the drugs, he's been so loose, and it's 100% different philosophy that I have and beliefs that I have. I think more is better because
you mean less is better.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Your son has been influencing you. He spent too long with Bostin this weekend, huh?
No, because less is still enough, right? But I can't. I've never been able to tell Bostin from my own experience, right, and from common sense. There's just the fact that, first of all, I don't know drugs nowadays if they're what they're supposed to be. It seemed like back in our day in the 70s and 80s, it was what it was. I mean, basically it was all pharmaceutical, right? You got drugs through the pharmacies, basically, right? Because doctors back then, remember, we got drugs from doctors. Doctors sent us our drugs in the UPS. We went to the pharmacy. Wow. That's how we'd line up at the counter and say, okay, you guys had 2 sips and an Anavar and a D-ball, and okay, it was legit. You'd call your doctor, and so nowadays, who knows, bathtubs, wherever it's made, whatever. But Bostin, he's taken his own path and had the risks that go along with it now, and he's unfortunately he's experiencing, and living that right now. But I have been totally opposed to his recklessness and his choices of just going overboard and stacking and this and that and the other. And, even a lot of it's for the sake of, wanting to be able to tell people and making mistakes and tell people, okay, this is what I did, but
simply to learn. Yeah. Interesting.
This, right. Helping other people to learn from, but he's got, the way he's gone about it has been just torture for his parents, because it's his health at risk. And now he's seeing that, so no, I've been totally, I mean, from the very beginning, Bostin told me he was 17, when my first memory of him telling me that he was sneaking anabolics at that time from the stepfather. I had to inject, I think, Dehydrate in an insulin syringe. And then he was limping. That weekend up in Northern California. We went to a couple shows to check him out, and he's limping. And he told me, I said, Bostin, he goes, Dad, I got to tell you why I'm limping. Thigh, and it's gone. And then Leo, we just had this conversation tonight about the doctors thing and how doctors have told him, we just got some blood tests.
Leo, you're gonna let me tell Leo this. You're gonna be so shocked right now. I just saw blood work from mine from 2009 when I was 17 years old.
Yeah.
Leo, my creatinine was 2.7 and my GFR was at 35.
Wow. The doctors never.
They never said anything.
No, they didn't.
But then I got blood work done in 2018 and my creatinine was 0.90 with a GFR of 110. So they must have recovered.
You might have had a reoccurring inflammatory condition in the kidney. Yeah, Mr.
17 is crazy.
Mr. Lloyd, we don't even know what condition he has in the kidney. I mean, the doctors have ultrasounded it, but they haven't even diagnosed him with the condition. So we literally don't know what to research because he doesn't have, so normally bodybuilders get scarring in the kidney. The kidney like grows and these things in the kidney basically break off and then you get scarring there. It's called glomerulosclerosis. He doesn't have that apparently in the ultrasounds. He has some cysts, but we don't know how many cysts and we don't know what their pattern is. So it could be the case that his kidneys were like very stressed for a period of time and they're still stressed because of the level of toxins in his body because they're not filtering well. And it could be the case that they might recover if the inflammation lowered.
Medical miracle and divine.
But the longer the period goes by at which this toxicity levels in the body, the less likely it would be to recover. So it's just annoying how his doctor doesn't even respond.
Yeah, I was trying to get him right when I was diagnosed with stage 5 kidney failure. What they should have done is they should have at least let me try a few dialysis sessions, but they refused.
So Leo, when I was with the ultrasound, is that something that your doctors have ordered?
I already got the ultrasound, and they found cysts. They didn't see any scarring.
So what's the follow-up to that? Because you and I haven't actually specifically talked about
There is
this.
no follow-up.
That's my point. There's no follow-up. They just ultrasounded it. They didn't tell him why they did it, and they didn't give him a diagnosis. But look at this, Mr. Lloyd. There's actually a Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville that is ranked as one of the top nephrologists places in the U.S., that specific clinic. So there's other options. Plus, we have a lot of doctors who follow the channel. So what we're trying to do now is just get the actual scan from him and show it to other doctors so we can get some idea really quickly.
I'm going to talk to my doctor because according to the people I got the ultrasound said I could get everything on like go online and go through like a portal or something.
Yeah.
So Leo, from the beginning, like when we'd have these consults with the doctors, like the incident I'm talking about in 2009, when we had those tests done, he was 17 and a half. Okay. And we walked outside from the doctor appointment, and the doctor sat him down when I was in there, and he said how what you're potentially going to be looking at down the road if you continue on this path, right? Of just being kind of like slipshod and taking this and that and the other thing without doctors oversight and maintaining what your blood levels and stuff. And Boston looked at me and said, "Dad, I'm not going to listen to a thing that doctor said."
This is what we deal with. So just,
I mean, that's the story, Leo. It's like he doesn't listen. Okay, so
I just wanted to explain that to the audience. So my approach with
that though, because Leo, what you just said about the ultrasound, Boston's never shared that with me.
That's why I was so happy to talk to you. By the way, I was planning. I hope that you can send your number to Boston and force him to give it to me, because I was planning maybe me and you can do some some work against Boston. Try to convince him. Yeah. So I was really happy to get to know Ariella, and now I get to know you. So now we can have like a mob-like effect on him, peer pressure him. Keep each other in the know at least, so we know what's going on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's my thing. Well, Mr. Lloyd, it was such a pleasure to speak with you tonight. Really, it was. I don't want to keep you guys up too much longer, but it was really great.
Can I ask a few questions real quick, though?
Of course, Scott.
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to ask you. I watched as many videos of Boston training online that I could find, and Boston, I don't know, Leo, if you've ever watched Boston train, but Boston trains with probably the best form of anybody I've ever seen. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, he lowers the bar, so slow and controlled. Did you teach him that, because you were doing 365-pound power cleans, to go the opposite route, or was that his own thing?
So not actually specifically showing him the kind of form you're describing, but Boston, from the time when Boston was 18 months old, he was watching his parents train.
Interesting.
and in the gym all the time. So he was like, I noticed from a very young, when he was, even when I joked about the years where he was in middle school and he didn't care about training. He was like, bored with the whole thing, all that. The kid always had he knew how to train. He knew form. But as far as the calculated slowness of the repetitions and like you're describing, no, because that's never been, I mean, my form is of course, good, but that's never been my style to go. You're talking about doing
like he's just saying, I don't use heavy weight. I go
concentrated. Yeah, that was never my style. So that part Bostin picked up on wherever he picked it up. The way you squeeze the muscle and go lighter, and but that's such a smart way to train, though, as far as healthiness for the joints.
Yeah,
and it's very intense. And if you do that systematically and consistently, you really, your body can't even handle the same amount of sets if you're doing normal type of just 2 second negatives with 1 second positives, like most of us train. So no, his form has been impeccable, but he didn't get that part from me. Where did you get that, son?
I don't know. Well, I always saw my mom and my dad training in the gym. So like the exercises I use are based on what I've been grown up with, but I think just feeling the muscle and not needing to go heavy. I don't know. It just, I started doing that after I hurt my pec in 13.
So hurting his pec, that was a total, that was so upsetting because he didn't listen. I go, Bus, what are you doing? He was, he's talking about my initial pec injury. The very first time with the bench press, where he, like the second set, he put 3 plates on 315. I go, what are you doing? Because I feel strong today. I go, great, but you still got to warm up.
I was loaded up on super draw, and I put on like 80 pounds on my bench in 3 weeks.
That'll get you an injury. Yeah.
So frustrating.
Well, I was surprised just to learn that he was so athletic naturally, and also that his father was so strong. Because Bostin always says he's not strong, which now I'm suspicious that it's just because he never tried to be strong.
I was strong when I was younger. Like at 17, I was doing like the 150-pound dumbbells on flat for like 12 to 15 reps.
Oh, wow.
No, Leo, pressing. I'd see Bostin with like 135s and the seated dumbbell presses and doing them like they were paper toys.
Wow.
Adding like the type of reps, the slow reps that Scotty's talking about.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
No, his pressing power but his back too. He's got the power. Now I'm glad he never got into the crazy weights with his legs like his father, because he doesn't have.
That's what you feel for the rest of your life.
Knees will last him.
Yeah, because I always think about that. Like the lower body stuff is there's more pain when you're older because of the back and the knees and the hips. Yeah.
You can't feel the body.
All right, guys. Well, Scott, you wanted to ask another question?
Oh, yeah. One more question. A couple things I noticed about Bostin. Bostin, he feels really good about himself. You can tell, like, he's very confident, feels very good about himself, and it doesn't really matter what other people think. And he has really strong values. I've talked to him about it, and he told me, his values, and he doesn't really care what anybody else thinks either, which to me that I was really impressed about him. And I'm just wondering, like, as a father, as his dad, because I'm a parent, like, how did you instill those qualities in him? Because they seem, so strong in him.
Yeah. Honesty as well. One of the most impressive.
And morals too.
Yeah.
I think that just, both his mom and myself from a very, very young age, we lived a life that was morally right and taught him values that and character values that are important, that his mom and dad exemplified, because kids learn you can talk to, with Boston, you can talk to a child, your children, until the cows come home, but they really respond to what they see. So probably much of it was because of Boston's exposure to his parents in relation with other people, because the business, that gym business is a people business. And so he saw by example, I think that probably more that had to do with Boston's molding from the beginning of his character, his values, his morals, and just his values in life, like Scotty, like you're talking about, from just seeing the interaction of his parents with other people, how we lived our lives, what we talked to him about that's important in life as far as, loving people, caring for people. From the time Boston was very young, we were taking him, he was going to the Ronald McDonald House, seeing kids that were battling for their lives with cancer from, these infants and these children. He saw perspectives. We had people in our gym that were disabled, were mentally challenged, and we do have events, and things that we'd help these kids and families and things out that would make a difference in their lives and added a spark and quality to the lives that, they were otherwise compromised. Boston saw a lot of that through interaction with us and other people that were just, because it's all a lot about who you have, your network of friends and your family and loved ones too around your children. So I think all of that combined really had a molding effect on Boston's character. But it's also, I think, you have kids that are raised by the same parents and the same type of upbringing, and some kids, they can turn out different from the same family. So a lot of it is individual and, just the person that they are, too. So, but I think a lot of it has to do with just the general way Boston was raised.
Well, I have to applaud you, Mr. Lloyd, for what Scott said, actually, because maybe another thing you don't know to tell you between you and I, when I talk to Boston privately, he will pick his morals over financial income every time. And not only that, he'll go out of his way to do morally righteous things that could somehow harm his career or something like that. Yeah. And he'll just do this consistently, even though people don't know about it.
Right.
And he won't associate with anybody that does something immoral that he knows about, like mistreats clients or something like that. He won't, he's very interesting.
Values, he's so solid that way.
Yeah.
And he's so, he's an example of really, of just good moral,
that's true,
character and upstanding values that he has. I remember there was a time where I think it was a little house. He had a little. I think it was when you were in the house in Concord, and you had a schedule. You wanted to train. You wanted to do whatever you had to do that afternoon, and that I think it was the mom of one of your friends or a neighbor. They needed assistance. Or they needed a ride. Somewhere, or it was one of the, it was something that you had to go out of your way, but you didn't hesitate. You dropped everything that you had to do. And as an elderly person, you either transported them somewhere or you did something that was just a kind act that it's not typical of someone. You were only like 18 at the time, of someone your age, young. A lot of times they just think about, what their world, and they're not looking around what the big picture of what's really important. But that was a true example of what Scotty's bringing up and what Leo's talking about as far as your moral character and your general kindness for people that just comes out of your heart.
He does that kind of stuff all the time still. So I hope you're a very proud father. Really, you should be. I would be.
I appreciate all the kind words, guys. I appreciate it.
All right. Enough being kind to each other. I'll let you guys be for the night. You guys have a good night. Mr. Lloyd, it was such a pleasure to meet you. We have to connect so that we can keep ourselves informed on Boston's activities and also maybe peer pressure him sometimes.
I'll give him your number,
I'll
Leo.
get your number, okay, Leo? Okay.
All right. That's great. Okay.
Scotty's.
All right, guys. Well, I'll talk to you guys soon. Scott, have a great night as well.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.